Chapter 1.4 is solving absolute value equations, and there is a reason that I have a picture of somebody in jail. It's just what I think of when I do absolute values. So, what is an absolute value? Oops. The absolute value is the distance between the origin and the point representing the real number. So basically what's happening is, say I have a number line like this, and I have 0, and I have 5, and I have -5. The distance between 0 and 5 is 5, right? I'm going in a positive direction, so we have 5. But what about this? I'm going from 0 to -5. Isn't that -5? Well, when we're talking about a distance, it's still 5, even though we're going in a negative direction. It's still 5 units. And that's what absolute value means. Anything in an absolute value sign is positive, which is the first property that I have listed on your notes. Okay, so this just means that the absolute value of any number is greater than or equal to 0. So that means it's 0 or positive. The second is that the absolute value of a negative number equals the absolute value of the positive number. So for example, if I take the absolute value of -2, that equals 2, right? Well, the absolute value of 2 also equals 2. Therefore, the absolute value of -2 equals the absolute value of 2. Okay. I'm going to have to erase that for space. Okay, the third one is that I can, if I have a product of 2 numbers or 2 variables or one of each, I can cut them up. I can separate them. If this was A minus B, then I couldn't do that. Okay, it has to be a product. And that kind of leads us into the quotient. I have A divided by B. I can cut that up too, as long as B doesn't equal 0, because we can't divide by 0. Okay, I've seen this before where we can't divide by 0. That's when the 0's on the bottom. So the answer is no, you can't. Okay, but if 0's in the numerator, it's okay. It'll equal 0, because 0 divided by whatever number is still, you're still going to have 0 things. Okay. So this next slide tells us how we actually solve these absolute value equations. We have to take into consideration that this in here is going to be a positive number, and when we take the absolute value, it'll be positive. But if this number in here is negative, and we take the absolute value of it, it's still positive. So when we are figuring out solving the equation, we actually have 2 equations. We have ax plus b equals c, which is just this without the absolute value signs, and we also have ax plus b equals -c. So it's exactly the same, but we put a negative in front of the c. And it'll be more obvious when we have an example. Okay, also, when c is less than 0, so when c is negative, the absolute value equation, ax plus b is equal to c, has no solution because absolute value always indicates a number that is not negative, or it's 0 or positive. So you can't take the absolute value of this and get a negative number. Okay, that's all that's saying. Okay, so let's look at an example. So when I'm solving this, what I think of, this reminds me of jail. And to get out of jail, okay, we have to have 2 equations. One is exactly what we've got. Okay, and the other one is x minus 4 equals -6. Because you have to remember, The absolute value of negative 6 is the same thing as 6. And even though I don't have an absolute value here, these two things are taking into consideration when this is positive and when this is negative. Okay, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a sec. So okay, so we're going to add 4 to both sides over here, and I get x equals 10. Add 4 to both sides over here, and I get x, excuse me, x equals negative 2. Now how in the world could there be two answers? So let's check this. Let's plug these both in. If I plug in the 10, I get 10 minus 4 equals 6, the absolute value of that. Well, that's positive. A positive 6, the absolute value of a positive 6 equals 6. Well, if I put in a negative 2, I have negative 2 minus 4 equals 6. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6, which also equals 6 when I take the absolute value of it. Okay, so that's why we have it equal to 6 and to negative 6, because what's in here can be positive or negative. Okay, so I come over here, and I have a negative over here. Can I take the absolute value of something and get a negative? No, I can't. So in this case, there is no solution. Okay. So I think I'm gonna pause the video now. Well, actually, no, I'm not. Go ahead and give these a try and pause the video and come back in just a sec. Okay, so this first one, again, remember we're going to have two equations. The first one is what it is without the absolute value sign. So it's just x equals 10. And remember, the second one is x equals the negative of what I have. So it's x equals negative 10. And that makes sense. The absolute value of 10 is 10. The absolute value of negative 10 is also 10. Okay, over here we have our two equations. X minus 1 equals 4, and x minus 1 equals negative 4. I'm going to add 1 to both sides over here, and I get x equals 5. And over here I'm going to add 1 to both sides, and I get x equals negative 3. So if I plug in 5 here, 5 minus 1 is 4. The absolute value of 4 is 4. If I plug in negative 3, I get negative 4, and the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And here we have another situation where they want this absolute value to equal something negative, and it can't. Okay, so this is no solution. Okay, hopefully you got those. All right, I'm going to end this video, but we'll be back in the next video.